Night always felt heavier in the new territories. The buildings were lower here, the roads narrower, the dark deeper between streetlights. When the last buses stopped running, taxis took over, crawling through quiet streets like tired insects. I worked the late shift because it paid better and because the night didn't ask questions. It just let you drive. Rain fell in thin lines, steady and cold. It tapped against the windshield and slid down in slow paths. I sat in my taxi under a flickering streetlight, engine idling, radio low. The clock on the dash read 11:47 p.m. At the depot, older drivers liked to talk before their shifts. Cigarettes glowing, coffee going cold. There are rules. One of them told me on my first week. He didn't look at me when he said it. Rules you don't ask about. Another laughed, but not kindly. If someone gets in after midnight and won't look at you, don't ask where they came from. And if they ask to go uphill, a third added, voice low, you say no. No one explained why. They didn't have to. In this job, silence was part of the training. I told myself those rules were old habits. Leftovers from stories told too many times. Hong Kong was full of them. Ghosts in towers, spirits in tunnels, voices in stairwells. The city ran on rumor as much as concrete. The clock clicked over to 12:01 a.m. I sighed, reached for my thermos, and was about to pull away when I saw her. She stood near the edge of the road where the light barely reached. No umbrella, no phone, just standing there still as a post. Rain soaked her hair and clung to her clothes. Pale blouse, dark skirt, both looked thin, old, worn too many times. I slowed without thinking. She didn't wave. She didn't step forward. I stopped anyway and unlocked the doors. The back door opened. She slid in quietly, barely making a sound. The smell of rain followed her. Sharp, clean, mixed with something else. Damp earth, maybe. Where to? I asked, eyes on the mirror. Her face was there, half-lit. Young, maybe mid-20s. Her skin looked too pale under the yellow light. Her eyes were dark, wide, fixed straight ahead. She didn't look at me. She spoke after a pause. Her voice was soft, steady, like she had practiced the words. Taipa Road, past the old hill. My fingers tightened on the wheel. That area's closed at night, I said. Landslide risk. She didn't react, didn't blink. There's an address, she said, and then told me a number. I had driven this city for years. I knew most roads by memory. This address meant nothing. I should have said no. Instead, I nodded and pulled back into the road. The meter clicked on. The radio hummed low, then crackled. I tapped it, annoyed, and it went quiet. We drove. At first, the city stayed with us. Neon signs blurred through rain. A late-night shopkeeper pulled down his shutter. Cat darted across the road. Life, thin but present. Then the road curved, climbing slowly. Buildings thinned. Streetlights spaced farther apart. The rain grew louder, or maybe everything else just fell away. Wind brushed against the car, pushing gently, like a hand testing a door. I checked the mirror again. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. Water dripped from her hair onto the seat, darkening the fabric. You okay back there? I asked, no answer. The meter flickered. Numbers jumped, froze, then jumped again. I frowned and tapped the screen. It buzzed under my finger, warm. The road narrowed. Trees leaned in close, their leaves whispering together. The headlights caught fog drifting low, rolling across the asphalt like breath. I felt it then, that feeling you get when someone is watching you, even though no one is there. My shoulders tensed. I shifted in my seat. You live up here? I asked, forcing my voice to stay casual. Silence. The climb felt longer than it should have. I glanced at the GPS. The map lagged, then refreshed. The road behind us stretched out too straight, too long. The road ahead blinked, then vanished. Rain hit harder now, drumming on the roof. The smell in the car changed. Stronger. Wet soil. Rotting leaves. The woman's eyes met mine in the mirror for the first time. They were calm. Not angry. Not afraid. Just tired. Almost there. she said. Her voice was closer now, like she was leaning forward, though she hadn't moved. The car crested the hill and slowed on its own. Ahead was an open space where the road should have continued. Headlights washed over tall weeds, broken concrete, a rusted guardrail bent inward like a wound. An empty lot, no house, no building, no lights. I pressed the brake and stopped. "This is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. I turned around. The back seat was empty. For a moment, my mind refused it. I looked again. The door was closed. No movement. No shape slipping away. Just the seat, darkened with water. A shallow pool soaking into the fabric. The air felt colder. I stepped out of the car. Rain soaked my jacket instantly. My shoes sank slightly into the soft ground at the edge of the road. I scanned the lot, heart pounding. "Miss," I called. Only rain answered. I walked a few steps forward. The weeds brushed my legs. The ground smelled rich, deep, alive. Too alive. Something crunched under my foot. I looked down. A piece of broken glass. Old. Edges worn smooth. I backed away quickly, returned to the car, and slammed the door shut. My hands shook as I wiped rain from the dashboard. The meter went dark. I sat there, breathing hard, listening to the rain. After a long moment, I put the car in reverse. The engine resisted, then caught. I turned around slowly and drove back downhill. The road felt shorter this time, straighter. The fog thinned. Streetlights reappeared, one by one. When I reached the main road, my phone buzzed. A missed call from the depot. I didn't answer. Back under the city lights, I pulled over and checked the back seat. The fabric was still wet, cold to the touch. When I lifted my fingers, they came away smelling of dirt. I rolled the windows down, even though the rain soaked in. As I drove on, I realized something else. I couldn't remember her face anymore, only the sound of her voice, and the address she gave me, echoing softly in my head, like a place that refused to be forgotten. Sleep would not come. I lay on my bed with the window open, listening to the city breathe. A bus sighed in the distance. Somewhere, a dog barked once and stopped. Rain had ended, but the air still felt wet, heavy against my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty lot, the weeds bending in my headlights, the way the ground looked soft, like it had been turned over too many times. I turned onto my side and reached for the radio on my nightstand. I kept it low at night, just enough to hear voices. It helped me feel less alone. The radio clicked on. Static filled the room. Then a voice cut through, sharp and sudden. "Almost there." I sat up. The voice faded back into noise. I turned the dial, heart beating fast. Another voice slipped through, broken, distant. "You live up here?" That was my voice. My hand froze on the dial. The radio hissed, then went quiet. I turned it off and sat there in the dark until morning. The taxi depot smelled like oil and old coffee. Men leaned against their cars, smoking, talking low. The sky was pale, washed out, like it hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. I poured myself coffee and stood near the counter. My eyes felt dry, sore. No one asked why. When I mentioned the hillside road, the air shifted. Conversation stopped. One driver crushed his cigarette under his shoe. Another stared into his cup like he might drown in it. "It was closed," I said. "Right? That road past Taipa." No one answered. An older man named Chan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded map. He spread it on the counter, smoothing it flat with slow care. His finger traced a thin line, then stopped. He marked a small X with his pen. "That's where you went?" he asked. I nodded. He folded the map again, smaller this time, and slipped it back into his pocket. "Don't go back," he said. That was all. I wanted to ask why. I wanted someone to tell me I was tired, that my mind had filled in gaps that weren't there. Instead, I thanked him and walked out. The road looked normal in daylight. Too normal. Sunlight filtered through trees. Birds moved in the branches. A delivery truck passed me, loud and real. I drove slow, watching every curve, every sign. The climb began just where I remembered, but the distance felt off. The road stretched longer than it should have. The curve near the bend took more time. The hill rose higher. My speed stayed the same, but the drive felt drawn out, like a breath held too long. I stopped near a small row of shops at the base of the hill. Most were closed. Metal shutters pulled down. Paint peeling. One shop was open. A narrow place selling snacks, drinks, old newspapers. A bell rang when I stepped inside. An elderly man sat behind the counter, reading. He looked up, eyes sharp. "Morning," I said. He nodded once. I bought a bottle of water I didn't need. My hands felt clumsy. "Excuse me," I said. "That road up there. The one past the hill." His eyes stayed on me longer now. "What about it?" "I drove someone there last night." He looked away. "That road's been trouble for years," he said. "Always has been." "Was there an accident?" I asked. He hesitated, then reached under the counter and pulled out a cloth. He wiped his hands, slow, like he was buying time. "A bus," he said. "Long time ago. Rain like that night. The hill gave way. I waited. They said everyone was accounted for," he added. "But saying something doesn't make it true." I left the shop with the sound of the bell following me out. That night, the radio stayed quiet at first. I drove my usual routes. Picked up office workers, a couple heading home late, a drunk man who laughed at his own jokes. The city felt steady again. Solid. Then, just after midnight, the radio crackled. "Any of you getting strange fares tonight?" a voice asked. Another answered. "You mean the wet ones?" Silence followed. I gripped the wheel. "They don't talk," someone said. "They just give an address. Always uphill." A pause. "I had one disappear," another voice added. Back seat was soaked. I pulled over and shut the engine off. My hands trembled. Over the next few nights, stories spread in pieces. One driver quit mid-shift and never came back. Another turned in his keys without a word. A third didn't show up at all. The depot felt thinner, like a room missing furniture. Empty spaces where people used to stand. I tried to avoid the hill, took longer routes, turned off the radio, told myself I could let it go. But every night, my eyes drifted to the roads leading north, to the darker stretches where the city loosened its grip. The pull was quiet, not forceful, more like a thought that wouldn't leave. Something was unfinished. On the fifth night, rain returned. It came down harder than before, pounding the streets, washing the neon into long streaks of color. I parked near a bridge and waited, engine idling. A figure stood by the curb. My chest tightened. She didn't move, just waited. I drove past. In the mirror, she stayed where she was, rain pouring through her like she was part of it. I kept driving until my hands stopped shaking. Later, at a red light, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You drove the road." I stared at the screen, typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. The light turned green. I drove. That night, I dreamed of a line of cars climbing the hill, headlights cutting through fog. No drivers inside, just empty seats and wet floors. When I woke, the smell of damp earth lingered in my room. I stood at the edge of the hill road again the next day, sunlight bright, traffic light. It looked harmless, just asphalt and trees. But I knew now, some roads don't end where they should. Some carry more than people. I understood why the older drivers stayed quiet, why they folded maps and looked away. It wasn't fear, it was duty. And as I stood there, feeling the pull tighten in my chest, I knew I would go back. Not because I wanted answers, because something was waiting to be taken home. The path into the hills was not marked. I parked the taxi where the road thinned and turned to gravel. Morning light barely reached through the trees. The air smelled wet, even though it hadn't rained since last night. Leaves stuck to my shoes as I stepped out. Somewhere far off, a bird called once, then went quiet. I followed what looked like a trail. It wasn't made for walking, more like a space people had passed through enough times to press the ground flat. The trees leaned close, branches crossing overhead. My phone lost signal after a few steps. The screen went blank, then dim. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No traffic, no wind, just my breath and the soft sound of my shoes against dirt. I found the stones by accident. They sat in a clearing no wider than a small room. Uneven rocks, some standing, some fallen. Moss covered most of them. Water pooled at their bases. At first glance, they looked like old boundary markers, forgotten and left to sink back into the hill. Then I saw the writing. Names carved shallow, letters worn down by years of rain. Some were clear. Some had faded into scratches. I stepped closer and brushed moss aside with my sleeve. A name stared back at me. Another stone held two names. Another, just one, carved smaller, like someone had run out of space or courage. At the foot of the stones lay offerings. Coins black with age. Cigarettes soaked and bent. A taxi driver's ID card, the photo washed pale, the name barely readable. Someone had left a small toy car. Its paint chipped. Its wheels stuck with mud. The smell here was strong. Earth. Mold. Something sweet turning sour. I stood there longer than I meant to. My chest felt tight, like I had climbed too fast. I counted the stones. More than I expected. Fewer than a bus full of people. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. A man stood at the edge of the clearing. Older. His jacket was faded, the zipper broken. His hair was thin and gray, cut short. He held a plastic bag in one hand. "You found it," he said. I nodded. He stepped closer and set the bag down near one of the stones. Inside were oranges peeled halfway, their skins curling back. "I come once a month," he said. "More when it rains." "You knew them?" I asked. He looked at the stones, not at me. "I pulled some out," he said. That night, we stood in silence. The hill seemed to listen. "The bus slipped," he went on. "Hit the guardrail. Then the ground moved. Fast, loud, like the hill was breathing." He crouched and touched one stone gently. "They counted bodies at the hospital," he said. "Not here. Some were buried deep. Some washed farther down. Papers went missing. Numbers changed." "Why?" I asked. He shrugged. "Money," he said. "Less people, less payout. Easier to say they were never on the bus." My stomach turned. "They told us to stop looking," he added. "Said it wasn't safe. Said we had enough." He stood and wiped his hands on his jacket. "But the hill remembers," he said. I wanted to ask more. Names, faces, dates. But he picked up his empty bag and walked past me, back toward the trees. He did not look back. I stayed until the light shifted and shadows stretched long across the stones. When I left, my shoes felt heavier. That night, sleep came fast and hard. I was standing in the back seat of my taxi. Rain hit the windows, but no sound came with it. The road climbed ahead, endless. No lights, no signs. She sat in the front passenger seat. Her face was clear now, younger than I thought. Her hair clung to her cheeks. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "You didn't forget," she said. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "I tried," I said. She turned to face me fully. Anger flashed across her face, sharp and quick. "Not you," she said. "Them." She pointed ahead, toward the dark road. "They erased us," she said. "Like chalk in rain." The taxi slowed. The engine coughed once. Her hand reached back, touching the glass between us. Her palm left a print, fogging the surface. "Say our names," she said. I woke with a sharp breath. The room was dark, early morning. My window was fogged from the humid air. My heart pounded in my ears. Something was written on the glass. A name, clear as if traced by a finger from the inside. I wiped my eyes and looked again. It did not fade. I grabbed my phone. No signal. No notifications. Just the time blinking. 5:12 a.m. The radio on my shelf clicked on by itself. Silence. Not static. Not noise. Nothing at all. I turned the dial. Every channel was dead. At the depot later that day, drivers stood around their cars, confused. Radios didn't work. Dispatch was down. Phones showed full bars but no calls went through. Screens in the cars flickered. Maps loaded slowly, then froze. Then, one by one, the GPS screens changed. A road appeared where none should be. The hill road, highlighted, blinking. Every screen showed it. Someone swore. Someone else shut off their engine and walked away. I sat in my taxi and stared at the map. The blinking light pulsed steady, patient. I thought of the stones. The names carved too shallow. The offerings left to rot in rain. This was not anger. This was waiting. That night, the city felt hollow. No taxis moved uphill. No radio spoke. The hill road glowed on every screen, asking without words. I rested my hands on the wheel and felt the weight of it settle in my chest. They did not want fear. They wanted to be counted. Outside, clouds gathered over the hills, thick and low. The air pressed down, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I started the engine. The blinking light did not change. It only waited. Rain began just before midnight. It was light at first, a thin veil that softened the streetlights and dulled the sound of tires on the road. I sat in my taxi at the edge of the district, engine running, hands steady on the wheel. The GPS screen glowed softly. The hill road blinked. I did not look away. When the call came through, there was no voice, just an address. The same one. Uphill, past the bend where the city let go. "I'm on my way," I said, though no one was listening. I drove. At the base of the hill, they were waiting. Not one. Not two. The back doors opened, then the front passenger door. People stepped in quietly, filling the seats with careful movements. A man in a dark jacket. A woman holding a child's hand. An older woman with hair pinned neatly back. More behind them, shapes and faces pressed close. No one spoke. Their clothes were damp. Rain slid from their sleeves and pooled on the floor mats. The smell of wet earth filled the car, stronger than before, but not sharp. Familiar. I counted them without meaning to. Too many. The taxi sank slightly under the weight. I checked the mirror. Their faces were clear now. Tired, yes. Pale, but calm. Like people who had been waiting a long time and were ready to stop. The meter stayed dark. I pulled onto the hill road. The climb was slow. The engine strained, humming low. Rain thinned into mist, curling around the headlights. Trees leaned in close, their branches dripping softly, like a slow clock. No radio, no city noise, just the sound of the car and my own breathing. I felt them behind me, not watching, just there. Halfway up, the road smoothed out. The mist lifted slightly. I could see farther ahead than I ever had before. The memorial clearing came into view. I stopped the car. For a moment, nothing happened. Then doors opened. They stepped out one by one. Shoes touched wet ground without sound. They gathered beneath the trees, forming a line near the stones. Men, women, children, standing shoulder to shoulder. No one rushed. No one hesitated. They faced me. I shut off the engine and stepped out into the cool air. Dawn was close. The sky held a faint gray, like a held breath. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the papers. Names copied by hand from old reports, hospital logs, articles buried deep in archives. Some spelled twice in different ways. Some crossed out, then written again. Names that had slipped through cracks and stayed there. My hands shook. I took a breath and began. The first name left my mouth and settled into the air. Something shifted. The mist thinned. The space between the trees felt wider. A man near the front straightened slightly, like he had been carrying weight and could finally set it down. I read the next name, and the next. Each one landed gently, like a stone placed where it belonged. Faces softened. Lines eased. A child leaned closer to her mother. Rain stopped. By the time I reached the middle of the list, the air felt lighter. Not warm, just clear. I kept going. My voice stayed steady, even when my throat tightened, even when a name sounded too young, even when a surname matched the ID card I had seen at the hill. No one spoke. They listened. When I reached the last name, I paused. She stood at the end of the line, the woman from the first night. Her face was calm now. No anger. No fear, just quiet. I spoke her name. She met my eyes and nodded once. Then she smiled. It was small, almost shy, like someone being seen after standing in shadow too long. Her shape faded slowly, like breath on glass. One by one, the others followed, not disappearing all at once, but gently, as if stepping back into the hill. The line grew shorter. The clearing opened. Soon, no one stood there at all. Only stones, trees, morning light. I stood alone, papers limp in my hand. The hill felt different now. Still, rested. I returned to the taxi. The back seats were dry. No smell. No weight. I turned the key. The engine started without trouble. As I drove down, the road behind me shortened. Curves returned to where they belonged. The GPS blinked once, then went blank. At the base of the hill, dawn broke fully. Light spilled across the city, touching rooftops and roads. The hill road did not appear again. I pulled over near a quiet street and sat there, watching the sky brighten. My chest felt hollow but not empty. I had carried them. Now I could let them go. When the radio clicked back on, it played only music. Soft, ordinary. I drove back into the city as people began their day, unaware of what had passed through the night. Some fares are paid in silence. This one was finished. Morning traffic filled the roads again. Horns argued at crossings. Office lights blinked on and off in tall buildings. From a distance, everything looked the same as before. I went back to work 2 nights later. The taxi felt lighter when I sat inside it. Clean, quiet. The seat still held the shape of my body, familiar and real. I adjusted the mirror and started the engine. The sound was steady, calm. The radio came on without static. Music played, a simple tune. Nothing strange in the voice between songs. But when I turned the dial, I found gaps. Some frequencies were gone. Not noise, not silence. Just empty space like roads that had been closed and paved over. I stopped turning and left it where the music was clear. I drove. The city at night felt different now. Not darker, just slower. I noticed small things I used to miss. A light left on in a stairwell. A man sweeping his shop floor long after closing. A woman standing at a bus stop even though the last bus had passed. I picked up fares. Took them where they needed to go. No one asked to go uphill past the old bend. At the depot, the older drivers watched me. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Chan met my eyes once, just for a moment. He nodded. Nothing more. Someone poured me coffee without asking. Another driver moved aside to make space near the counter. Their faces held something soft and heavy at the same time. Gratitude, sorrow. We stood together in silence, listening to engines cool and reheat. The hill made the news 2 weeks later. A short piece, buried between traffic updates and weather. Past accident officially reviewed. Records corrected. Acknowledgement given. No names read aloud. Just numbers. A small plaque appeared near the base of the hill road. Simple metal. Plain words. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. I stopped there once. Cars passed behind me, fast and loud. No one slowed down. No one read it. I stood for a moment, then got back into my taxi and drove on. I never saw them again. No silent passengers. No wet footprints. No fogged windows with writing on the glass. But some nights, when the city thinned out and the roads stretched long, I felt it. A weight in the back seat. Not heavy, just present. I checked the mirror the first few times. Old habit. There was never anyone there. The feeling did not scare me. It felt like someone riding along, looking out the window, sharing the quiet. I learned to let it be. Driving at night teaches you how to listen. Not just to sound, but to what sits between sounds. The pause after a radio voice fades. The hush when rain stops all at once. That was where they lived now. In the spaces. I understood, finally, why the older drivers refused to tell the story. Words turn things into noise. Stories get worn down when passed too freely. What remained of that hill did not need to be shaped into warnings or legends. It needed to be carried. Carefully. Late one night, I picked up a young driver from the depot. His shift had ended early. He looked tired. New. As we drove, he asked, "Is it always this quiet?" "Sometimes," I said. He hesitated, then asked, "They say there are roads you shouldn't take." I kept my eyes on the road. "Some roads," I said, "are finished with us. That's all." He nodded, unsure if that was an answer. We rode the rest of the way without speaking. When I dropped him off, he thanked me twice. I drove on. Near dawn, the sky began to change. The black softened to gray. Birds stirred in trees. A bakery door opened somewhere, letting out warm air and the smell of bread. I felt the presence in the back seat fade, gentle as breath. By the time the sun touched the tops of buildings, I was alone again. I parked the taxi and turned off the engine. The silence stayed, calm and full. Some truths are not meant to travel fast. They move the way a taxi does at night. One ride at a time. One person willing to listen. One driver willing to carry what cannot be left behind. That is what we take home. Not fear, not stories, just the weight of knowing and the care to keep it quiet when the city finally sleeps.